So they are rounding them up, then taking them to jail. And the next day, early in the morning, they are putting them on trucks, a lot of trucks with these black migrants, and then driving into the desert, in the middle of nowhere, and asking them to get off the trucks. So they are kicking them from those trucks and turning back their trucks around and going back to the city, leaving these innocent, helpless black people in the desert in the middle of nowhere. They are leaving them in the middle of the desert without water. You'll recall back in February, I think, the Tunisia's authoritarian President Kais Saied calling upon all Tunisians to rise up and attack black people. In other words, he was inciting racist attacks against black sub-Saharan Africans. And he said this during this National Security Council meeting, and he was trying to divert from what was happening in Tunisia at the time, which was economic recession. So he decided to use now black people as a scapegoat and said that these people were hordes, and this is what he said, hordes bringing violence and crime to Tunisia. He went ahead to say that there was a conspiracy plot called the Great Replacement, which aimed at changing Tunisia's demographic composition. Basically, what he meant, he said that there was this conspiracy plot that the 12 million Tunisians, who a majority of them are Arabs, then there's the Berber and other communities, are supposed to be replaced or neutralized using black people who are supposed to be now residents of Tunisia. So after he said that, there was a lot of racial attacks against black people in Tunisia. And you saw what happened. A lot of African countries reacted to this. The African Union actually cancelled a summit that was going to be held in Tunisia that same month. So they cancelled that, and they also wrote a protest letter to Tunisia. But a lot of African countries responded by, first of all, sending planes to evacuate their own citizens. I saw Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Guinea, Conakry, and Senegal sending, and even Mali, sending planes chartered by their own government to go and evacuate their own people. But it didn't end there. Recently, as recent as last week, Tunisia has been rounding up black people, which they accuse as migrants transiting through Tunisia. So they are rounding them up, then taking them to jail. And the next day, early in the morning, they are putting them on trucks, a lot of trucks with these black migrants, and then driving into the desert, in the middle of nowhere, and asking them to get off the trucks. So they are kicking them from those trucks and turning back their trucks around and going back to the city, leaving these innocent, helpless black people in the desert in the middle of nowhere. And you know what happens after that? Once the sun comes up, they are left having to survive and fight for their life. A lot of them are actually ending up dead in the desert because they are leaving them without any form of shelter or water. They are leaving them in the middle of the desert without water. According to this article from Algeria, it says that hundreds of black African refugees and migrants left along Tunisia's desolate borders are missing, dead or suffering. And this is what is happening to these people. A lot of them are being left there in the desert and they are disappearing. Basically, they are dying and getting covered by the sand in the desert. So, according to one of the accounts, they say that they were so thirsty, they had to drink seawater. So they were left without water, food, or protection from the sun. The expulsion of black African refugees and migrants from the city of Sfax to the desolate areas on the Tunisia's borders was the culmination of what many say were months of racist abuse. Definitely, from February to now, the government in Tunisia is relentlessly trying to kick out any black person from Tunisia. I've never seen anything like it anywhere. I mean, in 2023, this is something that you don't expect people to do. If you hate a certain group of people, women, children, men, everyone, you can't be doing that in 2023. This is dangerous, right? So they're doing that, and throwing people in the desert, and nothing is happening because this is Tunisia. No one is talking about it, because if it was an African country doing it to Arabs or doing it to white people like Zimbabwe did back in 1998 to 2002, this would be world news. But because it's black people being kicked out, then this is no news. And the other thing is that the EU is paying Tunisia to ensure that these people, the black people, are kicked out of Tunisia. There is a lot of money being paid to the Tunisia, according to this article, 1.1 billion US dollar by the EU, mostly by Germany and other countries in Europe, to ensure that Tunisia turns the black migrants around by using these unorthodox methods, by putting them on trucks and dumping them into the desert where they die, instead of allowing them to cross the Mediterranean. So again, that's why it's not being discussed, because it is something that Tunisia is getting paid by the European countries to do.